In this New York case involving this public safety exception, once again, we know the police went to this supermarket to arrest the defendant for sexual assault. And then the police knew the defendant had a gun. But when the police actually arrested the defendant, the gun was no longer with him, and then the police asked him, where is the gun? So we want to analyze these facts of the case a little bit further. We understand there are two conditions for the we said there are two conditions must be satisfied before police are required to issue the Miranda warning. One is the person is in police custody. Another one is there is a police interrogation. But we need to understand in this case, the defendant was in police custody, and because the police already arrested him, and then the police asked him, where is the gun? That was a police interrogation. So according to this normal requirement, the police should issue the Miranda warning before the police asked the question. But in this case, of course, the police did not do it. The police first asked, where is the gun? And after police retrieved the gun, and then the police came back, and then the police issued the Miranda warning. We know technically, and then there was a violation of this Miranda procedural protection. But in this case, the court said because there was a public safety concern in that supermarket, if the gun was not found quickly, that could pose a risk to public safety. So the court in this case created this public safety exception. The court said whenever this public safety is a concern, and then the police may interrogate without first issuing the Miranda warning. So that is what we mean by this public safety exception. And in this Missouri case that involves this police interrogation tactic, the police did not really like this Miranda procedural protection. The police, they are concerned if they issue the Miranda warning, the suspect may not confess to the crime they committed. So in this Missouri case, and then this particular police interrogation technique used was the police would interrogate the suspect first without the Miranda warning. And after the suspect confessed, and then they would have this second interrogation, and with the Miranda warnings, and then if the defendant, if the suspect would confess to his crime, and then the police would use this second interrogation, because this second interrogation was conducted after the police issued the Miranda warning. But of course, there was concern here that was in the first interrogation, the police did not issue the Miranda warning, and then the suspect already confessed to his crime, and then maybe the suspect would think, I already confessed to my crime, and then what difference that would make if now I just repeat my statement again. So that would be the second interrogation. So the police was trying to avoid this impact of this Miranda warning in this interrogation techniques. In this interrogation tactic, that is first interrogation, there would be no warning, and then after the suspect confessed, and then the police would issue the Miranda warning and conduct the second interrogation. It is important for us to know, in this Missouri case, the court actually struck down this police interrogation tactic. The court said this police interrogation tactic was designed to avoid this Miranda procedural protection. So the court said this police interrogation tactic was in violation of the law. So the police could not engage in this kind of tactic to get confessions from the defendant. So that is the point of this Missouri case. In this next case, in this Burgess versus Tompkins, the issue was what happened in the case was the defendant was involved in a murder case, and then the police interrogated him for nearly 3 hours. And then the defendant did not indicate clearly whether he wanted to exercise his right to remain silent or not, but he did not really talk to the police for nearly 3 hours. So the issue is whether this silence, if the situation is if a suspect would not indicate clearly whether he wanted to exercise his right to remain silent, but at the same time he did not really talk to the police, and then whether police would consider the person actually wanted to exercise his right to remain silent or not. It is important for us to know in this case the ruling of the court was if a suspect wants to exercise his Miranda right, he must indicate that unambiguously. Otherwise, the police may presume he does not want to exercise his right. So at this point, I think it is important for us to emphasize once again, according to law, after the police issue the suspect the Miranda warning, if the suspect indicate he wants to remain silent, the police questioning must stop. We know that is the law. If the suspect already says, I want to exercise my right to remain silent, if a police would continue interrogation, that would be in violation of the suspect's constitutional right. So the confession obtained could not be used in evidence. So that's why in this case, we must determine if the suspect did not indicate clearly that he wants to exercise his right to remain silent, but at the same time, he just remained silent. He just did not really talk to the police for most of the time, and whether in that situation, whether police should consider the person wanted to exercise his right or the person did not want to exercise his right. The answer given to the court is, if there was no clear indication that the person wanted to exercise his right, if the person would not indicate that clearly, and then the police could just presume the person does not want to exercise his right. So in this case, because there was no clear indication from the defendant that he wanted to exercise his right to remain silent, so even though he did not talk to the police during the course of the interrogation, but the police could presume he actually did not want to exercise his right. So if that was the case, the continued police interrogation would not be considered in violation of the defendant's constitutional right, because we know if the person indicated he wanted to exercise his right, and then the police must stop interrogation, must stop questioning. But if the person did not make that indication, if the person did not say he wanted to exercise his right, the continued police interrogation would not be considered a violation of the person's right. So that's why in this case, the court said because the suspect did not indicate clearly whether he wanted to exercise his right or not, so the continued police interrogation would not be in violation of his right. So that is how we determine whether a suspect wants to or does not want to exercise his right to remain silent. In this Rhode Island's case, the issue was not. The issue was whether there was a police interrogation. So the issue was still, as we discussed several times already, after the Miranda warning is issued, if the suspect indicates he wants to remain silent, or if he wants to exercise his right to counsel, the police interrogation must stop. So in this Rhode Island case, the issue was the defendant was involved in a murder, and then after that, and the police suspected he dropped the gun near school for handicapped children. So the defendant, after the police arrested the defendant, the police did issue the Miranda warnings to him, and then the defendant also indicated he wanted to exercise his Miranda rights. So, of course, we know, according to law, the police interrogation must stop. And then, while these police officers were transporting this suspect to the police station in a police car, the police officers had a conversation among themselves. And then these police officers were talking about if the gun was not found, the gun possibly could be near this school for handicapped children. And then if these handicapped children would get hold of the gun, and then that could be very dangerous to them. And then because of this, this conversation, the defendant actually was sitting in the police car. He heard this conversation, and then he just indicated, and he would be waiting to help the police find the gun. And then, of course, based on the information provided by the defendant, the police indeed find this gun dropped by the defendant. But the issue here was the issue here in the case was whether this conversation between the police officers should be considered a form of interrogation. Because of this police conversation, and then, of course, the defendant made a statement and also led the police to the location of the gun. And then the ruling of the court was this conversation, the court said, actually it's important for us to understand it. The court said interrogation could take two forms. One is express questioning, meaning is the police would ask the defendant directly, would interrogate this suspect directly. That is one form of interrogation that is called express questioning. The court said in this case, of course, we did not have this express questioning. And then there could also be another form of police interrogation, that is the express questioning's functional equivalent. What do we mean by this functional equivalent? That is, by that we mean that is what is said or done by the police that the police know is likely to make the suspect make an incriminating statement. So that is what we mean by this express questioning's functional equivalent. The court said in this case, we did not have this functional equivalent either. So to understand this functional equivalent, we can just look at this example. Suppose these police officers actually they knew the defendant himself had a handicapped child, and then they just talk about this safety of handicapped children, and then if that was the case, and then probably we would have this functional equivalent, because by talking about this safety of handicapped children, maybe the defendant would make this incriminating statement. But in this case, of course, the police officer did not have that in mind, and of course, the defendant did not know the defendant, and of course, the defendant also had no handicapped child. So that's why the court said this conversation between the police officers were just innocent conversations among the officers, and then they would not know. By talking about this safety of handicapped children, the defendant would decide to lead the police to the location of the gun. So the court said there was no functional equivalent in this case. So also that means there was no police interrogation in this case.